Texas is a state built on legends. It carries the weight of old wars, tragic deaths, abandoned institutions, and grand buildings where the past seems to refuse to fade. Across its cities, small towns, and lonely backroads, there are places where people say the air changes, the shadows move on their own, and footsteps echo through empty halls long after everyone has gone home. Tonight, we're exploring 10 of the most haunted places in Texas. These are not just old buildings. These are places where history left something behind. So dim the lights, turn up the volume, and stay with me until the end, because the final location may be the one that lingers longest in your mind. In the historic town of Jefferson, Texas, stands a hotel that has witnessed more than a century of travelers, celebrations, and quiet midnight departures. The Jefferson Hotel is one of those places that looks beautiful in daylight, but at night, the atmosphere changes completely. Guests and staff have reported unexplained footsteps in empty hallways, doors opening and closing by themselves, and the sensation of being watched from just out of sight. One of the most enduring stories involves the ghost of a little girl, said to wander the halls after a tragic death tied to the building's past. Some visitors claim to hear faint laughter where there should be silence. Others describe a rocking chair moving on its own, or a strange coldness that settles in one corner of a room and refuses to leave. The Jefferson Hotel doesn't feel abandoned. It feels occupied by something you cannot quite see. In downtown Austin, the Driscoll Hotel has long been a symbol of old Texas elegance. Built in 1886, it remains one of the city's most famous landmarks. But behind the polished marble, grand chandeliers, and historic charm, there is another side to the building. People have reported the smell of cigar smoke in empty rooms, mysterious laughter in the corridors, and figures appearing in mirrors where no one stands. The ghost of Colonel Jesse Driscoll, the hotel's founder, is said to remain close to the place he built with such pride. One of the most famous legends tells of a young bride who died in the hotel after a tragic fall on the staircase. Since then, guests have described feeling a presence near the grand stairway, especially late at night when the lobby has gone still. The Driscoll is not only haunted by one story, it seems layered with many. A hotel built for luxury, now carrying the memory of every life that passed through its doors. Few places in Texas are more iconic than the Alamo. Known around the world for its role in the Texas Revolution, the Alamo is also one of the state's most emotionally charged sites. In 1836, the battle ended in devastating loss, and the names of those who died there became part of Texas legend forever. But some say the battle never truly ended. Visitors and employees have reported hearing phantom cannon fire, seeing shadowy soldiers moving through the grounds, and feeling sudden temperature drops with no explanation. Others describe an overwhelming sense of grief that seems to settle over the mission after dark. There are stories of strange voices echoing across the courtyard, and figures standing motionless in the corner of the eye, gone the moment they are looked at directly. The Alamo is more than a historic monument. It is a place where memory feels alive. If there is one place in Texas that feels universally described as unsettling, it is Yorktown Memorial Hospital. This abandoned hospital in Yorktown has gained a reputation for dark energy, paranormal activity, and stories that seem to multiply with every year. Once operated by the Felician Sisters, the hospital served the community for decades. But over time, It became associated with suffering, loss, and death. Today, visitors and ghost hunters report screams from empty rooms, shadow figures in hallways, and an overwhelming pressure that makes the building feel heavy, almost oppressive. Some claim to have heard crying from patient rooms long since abandoned. Others describe hearing footsteps approaching when no one is there. The building itself adds to the fear. Broken windows, peeling walls, rusted beds, and long corridors create the kind of atmosphere that feels frozen in the final moments before everything fell apart. At Yorktown Memorial Hospital, the silence is never really silent. In Galveston, standing near the Gulf Coast, Hotel Galvez has long been known as the Queen of the Gulf. It is beautiful, historic, and elegant, but it also carries one of Texas's most well-known ghost stories. The most famous legend here is that of the Loving Lady, a woman who is said to have waited for her husband after learning he was lost at sea. According to the story, her grief never faded, and her spirit remained tied to the hotel where she once hoped for his return. Guests have reported strange sounds in empty rooms, doors that open by themselves, and the feeling of someone sitting beside them on the bed. Some say they have seen a woman in white moving through the hallways or standing near windows overlooking the water. Hotel Galvez feels romantic at first glance, but beneath that charm is a sadness that never left. The kind of sadness that becomes a haunting. Located just steps from the Alamo, the Menger Hotel is one of the most famous historic hotels in Texas, and one of the most haunted. Opened in the 19th century, the Menger has hosted presidents, celebrities, and travelers from around the world, but among the many stories attached to the hotel is one of the most famous Texas ghost legends, Sally White, a chambermaid who died there and is said to still appear in a blue dress. People have also reported seeing other spirits in the hotel, hearing voices in empty rooms, and encountering unexplained cold spots. Some guests claim to have felt someone brush past them in a hallway, only to turn and find no one there. What makes the Menger especially eerie is that the hauntings seem woven into the building's daily life. It is not just a historic hotel with one ghost story. It is a place where the past appears active, a living hotel, with dead memories, and perhaps dead residents. Jails carry a different kind of energy than hotels or mansions. They are built for confinement, fear, and regret. The old Harrison County Jail in Marshall is no exception. Over the years, stories have emerged of prisoners whose presence supposedly never left the building. Visitors report hearing chains rattling in empty cells, whispering voices echoing through the corridors, and shadowy figures moving behind barred doors. Some claim to have seen an apparition standing in a cell window, only for it to disappear when approached. The oppressive feeling inside the jail is part of what makes it so unsettling. Thick walls, narrow hallways, and decaying interior spaces create the sense that the building is holding on to something painful. Unlike a hotel, where ghosts may seem like memories of guests, a jail feels like it remembers every scream, every plea, and every life that passed through in despair. Presidio La Bahia in Goliad is not just historic, it is sacred ground in the story of Texas. Its legacy is tied to one of the darkest events in Texas history, the Goliad Massacre. After the battle, hundreds of soldiers were executed, and that loss became one of the defining tragedies of the Texas Revolution. People who visit the Presidio and the surrounding area have reported strange voices, unexplained footsteps, apparitions, and a deep feeling of sorrow that seems to linger in the air. Some say they hear the sound of soldiers marching when the grounds are empty. Others describe seeing figures in period dress moving through the fort walls, before fading into darkness. The emotional weight of the place is undeniable. Whether experienced as spiritual presence or historical echo, the suffering connected to this site still feels active. Presidio La Bahia is a reminder that some places are haunted not only by ghosts, but by the memory of what happened there. The Gonzalez Memorial Museum sits on land tied to the beginning of revolution and conflict, and many believe that history left more than artifacts behind. The area around Gonzalez has long been associated with strange sightings, unexplained sounds, and reports of phantom activity. Visitors have described hearing footsteps in empty rooms, catching movement in glass reflections, and sensing invisible eyes watching from the shadows. Museums often preserve history in glass cases and displays. But in a place like this, some believe the past does not stay contained. It leaks into the air, into the hallways, into the moments when the building should be still. There is something especially eerie about a museum after hours. The silence feels unnatural. The artifacts feel less like objects and more like reminders. At Gonzalez, the line between history and haunting seems very thin. At the top of the list is the Orleans House in San Antonio, a location that has become legendary for its haunting reputation. Over the years, the building has been tied to tragic events, unsettling deaths, and stories that have only grown darker with time. Reports from visitors and investigators include ghostly children, objects moving on their own, strange voices, and unexplained activity that seems to intensify after dark. What makes the Orleans House so unnerving is not just the number of paranormal claims, but the consistency of the atmosphere described by those who enter. People speak of instant dread, heavy silence, and the feeling that they are not welcome. Some locations have one famous ghost story. The Orleans House feels like it has many. There are old buildings that look haunted, and then there are places that feel haunted the moment you arrive. This is one of them. From historic hotels to abandoned hospitals, from battlefields to old jails, Texas is filled with places where tragedy, memory, and mystery seem to live side by side. The Jefferson Hotel, the Driscoll Hotel, the Alamo, Yorktown Memorial Hospital, Hotel Galvez, the Menger Hotel, Old Harrison County Jail, Presidio La Bahia, Gonzalez Memorial Museum, and the Orleans House. Each one carries a story, each one carries a shadow, and each one reminds us that in Texas, the past is never far away.